It's a real pleasure to introduce Mark Vinecki, a forensic biologist who's going to be chairing and introducing Yuvan and monitoring the Q&A for us. And other than that, I think we are ready to have you, Mark. So I'm going to turn off my camera and audio, but I'll be in the background. So Mark, my pleasure to introduce you. Please go for it.
Thank you very much, Katie. I'm Mark Vinecki. I'm a fellow of the Linnean Society for quite a while. I probably look younger than I am. And I'm a biologist. So that's probably what makes me your chair tonight. And as Katie said, I will choose some of the questions. So the time schedule is going to be like 45 minutes of talk by Yuvan. And then depending on the questions, that I choose 15 to 30 more minutes of Q&A. Again, like Katie said, please do not put your questions in the chat. Please don't use the chat. Please use the Q&A button on the bottom of your screen. And by the way, if you can, visit the building of the Linnean Society, Burlington House. It's beautiful and has lots of old books too. Yuvan is in India, and it's noontime around here. Hello to everybody who is in different time zones, for example, early in the morning or having tea time, probably even. India, says the introduction text, has a vast and varied intertidal zone and bustles with ecological, climatic, and political drama. We have a lot of political drama on this planet, but India has its own share for a very long time indeed. Yuvan wrote a book called Intertidal, and it's a diary of deep observations of life on coasts and coastal wetlands and taking action for them, which is, of course, something that we love to do at the Linnean Society. He's going to read a little bit. He also has some sound snippets, and he also got some images to show. He's a writer, naturalist and activist based in Chennai. Visit the region. It's also beautiful, not only Burlington House. And he writes at the intersection of ecology, education, and human consciousness. He's the author of 2 books. And like I said, he's going to read something and show something of the books. And he also read a Nature Writing Award. So I will be quiet now too and hand it over to Yuvan. Yuvan, as you know, we are all in the background. So if anything glitches or something, we're going to cover your back. And I'll hand it over to you. Thank you very much for joining us at Linnean Society.
Thank you, Mark. It's wonderful to be introduced by you, and what an exciting person you are. I was just reading about you before coming here. This is my first time after my book was published in the UK, Intertidal. First time I'm speaking to an audience about it. So I want to start with the geography, because I understand people are from different parts of the world, maybe largely from the UK. And so let me share my screen and so that's India. And if you look at the southeast coast of India, it has a forehead, a nose, and a lip. It has a very pareidolia sort of coastline. And then right on the forehead is Chennai. And two ways to describe Chennai is it's a coast and it's largely a wetland. It's an extremely wet place. And this book is set there. And the climate of Chennai is very strange also. It's a difficult place, and it's made of a lot of lakes. And here, lakes, we say yeris in Tamil. Tamil is the language spoken here. One of the great privileges and problems in India is that any direction you travel 100 kilometers, a different language is spoken. And in some parts, for instance, even right now, if you go to certain rural areas and we look at the map, this is the number of wetlands you find. Robert Macfarlane says everybody lives in a watershed in his new book, Is a River Alive? That is so extraordinarily true for our landscape. And so this is a yeri. A yeri is a U-shaped bund, an earthen bund built sort of, blocking the flow of water so that it can be stored and used later for irrigation, other kinds of purposes. And it's done within river basins so that before the water reaches the river, it can percolate into the ground and so on. And very interestingly, it's been a extraordinary ecological force here. In in Tamil Nadu, that is, Chennai is the capital of the state, Tamil Nadu. We have about 25 bird sanctuaries, of which 22, 23 are human made. They are areas. That there's a sort of watery bird ecology, human kinship, which is part of its history. Now this is vanishing, and a lot of our fights and protests are to sort of stop that erasure of memory. Um, for instance, this bird sanctuary is called Vedandangal, and it's again this U-shaped structure. And over time, birds have just learned that if they go there, they are safe. And then their guano droppings fall into the water, and that water is used for irrigation of paddy fields, and then yields are amazing. Uh, that sort of sets up what kind of sort of hydrological history this place has. One more example of that would be, for instance, in North India. So I'm from South India. In North India, when kings used to, uh, let's say, win wars, or some great event happens, like a prince is born or something like that, they built something called a Jaya Stamba. It's a massive rock pillar of no use. Yeah, that's culturally debatable. But in South India, when such things happen, the then kings used to build something called a Jalastamba. Jalastamba is a sort of, it's called a water monument. And so they built lakes to celebrate any kind of auspicious event. And, it, culture, moral codes sort of sit on the ecology, the climate of this landscape. And one of the reasons that this sort of deep wetland uh, practices exist is because the rains we get, what's called the northeast monsoon, is very fickle and moody. If you look at the west coast of India, the rains come on time, they're on the dot. I mean, not too much longer because of climate change, but here, once in 4 or 5 years, there's a cyclone, really bad cyclone, and a sort of disastrous flood. And once in 4 or 5 years, there is a drought. So 2019, we had a drought. We had day zero. We were completely out of water. 2015, we had one of the worst floods. So I was sitting uh, in a campus building, eating peanuts for 5 days. It was a terrible flood. 2021 was a really bad flood, and so on. So it has that climate has a moody quality here. And so people knew that the way to live here was to store water and also make space for it to flow. Now, the earlier history of Chennai, even if you look till the 1980s, there were about 75 or more percent of the landscape was wetland. And then now, in the 2020s, only about 15% is. And so much of the construction, even the apartment where I'm living, in in water bodies, is in wetlands. So a lot of the flooding is not really flooding because we're sitting in the wetland. It's like um, if you jumped into a swimming pool, it's not called flooding. It's called going for a swim. It's like that. So urban flooding sort of follows that. So intertidal is set broadly in this landscape, and I want to read uh, one little bit um, just to start off with. This This is right after a cyclone. Every year we get at least 2 cyclones, and right now climate change is bringing about 3. Sometimes they're really bad, and sometimes they sort of come and pass. Urur Beach is one of the recurring places in Intertidal. Intertidal is really a praxis journal. It's a sort of a diary kept by being an activist, being observant of other species, working with children and public, taking them to wild places, fighting court battles for wetlands, forests, and also observing oneself. And intertidal is a habitat as well as a powerful metaphor. Uh, and I try to explore an equal sort of intertidal zone between self and other, nature and culture, as much as the intertidal zone of the between the low tide and the high tide. So, Urur Beach. Urur Beach has turned into a battleground of garbage after Cyclone Nivar. More species of single-use plastic lie in thick, tangled mats above the high tide line than one can count. Oddities like bike helmets, stuffed toys, steel vessels, and school bags are there too. A whole wooden sofa has washed ashore near the estuary. Trousers, saris, sanitary napkins, and elastic bands of undergarments. Then the residue of the pandemic, face masks of many styles and colors in their hundreds, sanitizer bottles and sachets, syringes, dirt and salt encrusted PPE gowns, baby ghost crabs crawling slowly amidst them. The floods had flushed out a year's worth garbage dumped into the Adayar River along various outfalls in the lower coast. The longshore currents and winds had strewn it all across the beach. No, this is not the ocean coughing garbage back at us as it is being explained in the news. This is the trash that was choking inland waterways. Rag pickers move uneasily through the crowd to collect what they can from the shoreline. They know this happens after each storm. The ocean is still muddy, though calm. Small spilling waves break on the intertidal, showing no swells further inside. Its winds are spent. The offshore waters are completely still. The ocean sounds like a forest brook flowing over smooth pebbles. Deep sea pelagic birds, which never venture onto land except for breeding on unpeopled islands, were blown in by the strong winds and seen taking refuge in marshes inland by bird watchers. And then that entry, I'm skipping a little forward. 3 days ago, Cyclone Nivar, surging from the Bay of Bengal at 60 knots, made its landfall near Chennai. Just before that, I waded out into the street, which had become a shallow, slow-flowing stream, to walk a bit into the water's memory of Velachery, once a marshland, now almost entirely paved over. The streets going down from the railway station road opposite my apartment were flooded high up to an auto rickshaws wheel, the water stagnant upon impervious tarmac. The main streets flowed towards Pallikarnai. There was a power cut for much of the day. Every storm takes me and most Chennai people back to the floods of December 2015, when most of Chennai went completely underwater for a few days. I remember it well because I spent it in something of an arc at the administration office of Patashala, a school in rural Chengalpet district. I took refuge with 2 other human colleagues, 2 barred wolf snakes, a common sand boa, another snake, colonies of black ants, procession ants spread over the walls, mud dauber wasps, sand wasps, field crickets, mole crickets, earthworms, and other small creatures displaced by the flood. It was labeled a human-made catastrophe resulting from bad urban planning and abject disaster management in a report later released by the Controller Auditor General of India. Climate change may be measured in carbon, but its mother tongue is water. That gives, I hope, a sense of this geography and hydrology. And before writing this book, there's a little map of um, There's different places Chennai is spread over. Cities are birthed by hydrologies, are birthed by rivers, and we get to a point where we forget that genesis, and then we start destroying the very backbone of what makes us exist in the first place. So just before writing Intertidal, I was actively part of multiple campaigns to save the wild places and wet spaces of this place. Up here in Pulicat Lagoon, there was a massive port which we have stopped and not let happen. A largest port in India, 6,111 acres, which will be built on the Kosasthalayar River. The Kosasthalayar River is the river which births Chennai, and that structure will jut 3,000 acres into the ocean. And we were trying to collect stories from this place and screw this project up, and not make it happen. And more importantly, above is the Pulicat Lagoon. Pulicat is an anglicization of Pala Ver Kadu, which means ancient jungle of roots. It's a mangrove forest, and if people are familiar with mangroves, they are estuarine trees, and there's a specific species of mangrove called the Abyssinia, which has these snorkeled roots which go down and then come up and form like a bed of arrows. And Pulicat Palaverkad is named after that. And based on the port's location, and the port is being proposed by one of the big, corporate criminals India and the world has seen, the Adani Group. That would erase this lagoon and merge it with the Bay of Bengal due to processes of coastal erosion, by blocking longshore currents. Maybe we could talk about that a little later. So this was going on. Here, where you can see the Adayar River, it meets the Bay of Bengal at a, it's at the Adayar estuary. And there, what was happening is a road was going to be built on the estuary. So Chennai has a colonial history, like most Indian cities. And one important thing to note about Chennai is uh, when the British uh, colonized it, it was split into black town and white town. So parts of just under this Kuam River was Georgetown, built by the British, and just naturally there, India has a caste system. The upper caste people were living to the south, and then to the north, the fisher folk, the lower caste people, other kinds of indigenous local people were living. So the British set a precedence of building all the dirty industries, the ports, the harbors, the coal power stations to the north. Not because it's a good place to build, but because people could be disenfranchised easily. And to the south, uh, life was going on. Um, and this North Chennai, South Chennai divide, even after India's independence, continues. Currently, we have 37. So everything above this Kuam River and Kosasthalayar River is North Chennai. Although that's what births Chennai hydrologically, that is the space of maximum abuse. So we have about 37 what are called red category industries, which means lethally polluting industries, your fertilizer factories, pesticide factories, petrochemical factories, all of them to the north. And to the south, uh, at the most, you have the IT hubs, you have the residences, you have the fancy parts of urbanization. So that's the sort of discriminatory developmental paradigm Chennai has followed even after coloniality left. Its post-colonial landscape just emulated what was set as a precedent. So these fights were going on. Coming back to that, and at Adayar Estuary, a road was going to be built. Fisherfolk were going to be evicted. In this place, olive ridley sea turtles come in hundreds and they nest. It's also an important bird area. And right below, beyond the where the Pala River meets the sea, and little south of that, there was a harbor being built. And this harbor was in an estuary which 40 kilometers from the estuary in the deeps underwater ridges, sperm whales gather to calf, have their calves. And having a mechanized harbor there would just slow down the whale population, as well as that was also a important bird area. So during this process, what happened was, I was trying to evoke these places and to create some sort of a public outcry, and that was really difficult to do. I remember one specific campaign where we're trying to stop the road from destroying the estuary and the beach, and and that was a very sort of powerful moment for me. I've gone onto the beach, numerous public there. We have a bunch of us are there with letters. We want it to be signed. We're going to submit it to a minister. And people are like, man, leave me alone. It's like, just leave me at peace, don't disturb me. And it's like, and some people are like, a road is good, like reduces traffic. And so there was a sense of coming to a place like a beach with a completely consumer extractive mindset. And when it was threatened, and when you were called to stand up for it, even in the merest sense, the one constantly banged one's head on people not willing to do that. And so what we started doing is we started conducting shore walks all across these places. I went on a 200-kilometer journey across the coast and started collecting local words for gastropods, bivalves, other kinds of species living here, local stories, which actually sort of vanishing from our daily speech. And only the elders of the local fisherfolk had this sort of knowledge. And then we made guides. We made a curriculum for schools to use, telling them, listen, here's a curriculum. It's called Seashells. That I think it's available on Amazon India. I can also share a free PDF, of course. You say, listen, ditch the classroom, come to the beach. It's a far more rich, living learning space than indoors can ever be. And the idea also was that creates connection. I think connection precedes care and a willingness to fight for a place. So these multiple campaigns sort of led me to want to write something like Intertidal, and also um, it has activism, it has this practice of nature education. It also has a deeply psychological aspect to it, where there's the observation of nature, but also the observation of the mind. I come from a sort of strange and difficult family background where, after facing a lot of violence from a stepfather, I ran away from home at 16 and landed up in my school principal's house at midnight. And I said, listen, I've run away from home. Don't send me back. I've faced 5 years of extraordinary violence and bloodshed. I want your advice. And he spoke to me, spoke to my mom, all of that. And he put me in, he accepted me into a residential school he had just started. And that period was a time of what later therapists diagnosed as complex PTSD. And for me, nature engagement was life saving in that sense. And the metaphors nature, other species could give were a survival need. So the the book sort of brings together all of this. I've tried to do that. um Let me see. So the sort of common thread through the book is a certain practice of attention, and that practice actively sees what is invisibilized, inconsequentialized, and what is not alive in public consciousness or public memory. I speak about often very small creatures, and I like to use it as a trick to disrupt the the general culturally constructed field of attention, politically constructed field of attention. We not we in the sense people often inhabit. And I want to read a couple of examples. And this is a ghost crab. It's a red ghost crab, very common species on the Chennai coast. To me, the life and physiology of ghost crabs is sheer science fiction and the stuff of mythology. They are everyday company, yet their utter otherworldliness has a pincer hold over me. Ghost crabs are coastal chimeras, edge of the world denizens living on the foggy cusp of land, sea, sand, and sky. They have lungs and gills to breathe in both air and water. They can hear and drink with the setae on their feet, speak in pincer signs, stridulations, and gut rumbles. They have panoramic 360-degree vision and cylindrical retinas atop their eerie, ghostly periscope eyes. Can see you coming from 50 meters away. For a ghost crab, the horizon is not a mere line in the sky, but a full circle. They can be moving forward, strolling on the shore, and instantly change direction and skedaddle sideways when they want to, dashing off at 15 kilometers per hour, faster than any land crustacean. They move and live and breathe to lunar rhythms, feeling the moon's tug in their blood, thickening and thinning, molting and growing during full and new moon phases. Watch them throughout the day, and their lunacy, that is moonliness, becomes more apparent. They change the color of their carapace according to the background brightness. Paler during the day and near full moon, distinctly darker at night and near new moon. They are compulsory company to all of Chennai's beachgoers. Very common species, seen every day, uh, not really noticed. Um, that's the ghost crab. I want to maybe do one more. Maybe take a moment to guess. I'm sure there are a bunch of marine biologists over here who will immediately tell what this is, but you can take a moment to guess what this could be while I out the page. Yeah, there's a lot of knowledge and learning I share from local people. It could be local fisher folk. It could be farmers. It could be rag pickers. It could be the Irula tribe who are traditional snake catchers. Those are some of the voices I try to evoke and cover and converse with in the book. So here goes. A few of the nets, so I'm on the beach. A few of the nets have snagged several decorator worms from clayey patches of the ocean bed. I open the heaped tangles on Valen's boat, my friend from Urur Kupam, who moonlights as a fisherman and works in an IT company during the day. Decorator worms are cross dressers, super gluing to their tubular cases what fragments they find and fancy on the seafloor. On one worm's shell shard stack attire, there is a tiny brittle star shining into the gaps and what looks like a porcelain crab having just grown out of its larval stage. Pieces of wedge clams stuck on the worm's clothing are growing acorn barnacles. I find another worm in Valen's boat with a different sense of style. It has used a bit of green plastic from a single use bag, blue plastic from a tarpaulin sheet, thick, clear packaging from an Amazon parcel, not the forest, the company, yeah. Black plastic from a meat bag, a piece of betel nut sachet and sunsilk shampoo sachet, then some shell fragments, sea fan bits, and nylon strands. It wears what it found and liked in its corner of the seabed. The fashion sensibilities of decorator worms are changing. Now, one of the realities one keeps meeting, especially in urban places, and the wildernesses and the novel ecologies birthed by uh, utter anthropogenic impact, is what I've learned to call a sort of post-industrial local knowledge. Um, this could be one example. A few examples would be, for instance, fisherfolk read the sea, and their traditional ways of reading the sea is changing. Um, for instance, to understand that the sea is downwelling, oceanic process where uh, the surface waters come towards the shore and the waters deeper in go away. Which means that it's not going to be great for fishing. Um, the sort of floating fauna like jellyfish and blue buttons and certain kinds of sea slugs beach on the coast. Now those are less. So now they look for plastic. If there's a sort of unusual beaching of plastic, it could mean downwelling. Similarly, upwelling is the time when the local name for that is Olni. Um, Upwelling is when you really want to go into the sea. You're going to find something like uh, a super colony of sardine. I'm talking about artisanal fisher folk who are local people. I'm not talking about mechanized fishing, which is a whose violence I speak about in the book. Um, these are people who've been doing this for millennia. So to spot an upwelling where deeper nutrient-rich waters are coming up and bringing with them, uh, sediment and therefore the entire plankton-driven, food web of the ocean. Last time that happened, there were 14 whale sharks and 2 bride whales hanging around here within eyesight, and a whole party of humpback dolphins. That's what an upwelling brings. It tends to beach what is found at the bottom of the continental shelf. So that could be shell shards, sea urchins, starfish, and so those sedimenting on the strand lines in dense deposits means that uh, you can go in and you're going to have a good catch. Those numbers are changing. So now fisher folk actually look for garbage which floats to the ground, rubber, iron, other kinds of things which come to the ground and they get bleached and say, I'm gonna. That's a very post-industrial way of reading the ocean. And another perhaps more relatable example for people in the UK would be aquatic biomonitoring, to look at rivers and tell if the water is healthy, if the water is happy. People read stoneflies, mayflies, caddisflies, and that really started after the great stink of the 1850s, when I think I just finished writing a history of biomonitoring, and the first instance I could find was in Cardiganshire. A hydrologist called Kathleen Carpenter was telling people, listen, if you don't find caddisflies in your streams, don't drink the water, because there could be lead in it, because lead leachate was going into the rivers there. And um, and before that time, before industrialization, you don't find that sort of knowledge, you don't find that sort of practice. um, Maybe I'll give one more example. In North Chennai, where there are a lot of coal power stations, um, traditionally, dragonflies, especially a species called Pantala flavescens, the wandering glider, if swarms gather, they're used to predict rain. Now, there, what happens is there are smokestacks, and if it's going to be rainy, there are clouds, and what is called the mixing height of the smokestack is less. So the smoke goes up, rebounds, and comes back. So people see dragonflies there, they'll say, listen, we're going to go breathless today, let's stay indoors. That sort of a knowledge I kept hitting, of people learning to read ecology in intersections of industry. This is one example. um, I want to read one more, and soon maybe we can break for questions, or maybe a couple more readings. And yeah. So a lot of our work, I run an organization called Palluyir Trust. Palluyir in Tamil, the language I speak, means all of life. There's a 2,500-year-old couplet written by a saint here, which says, Pagutundu Palluyir Ombudal, Nulor Toguttavatril Ellam Talai, which means to share and coexist with all of life is the coded meaning of all the ages of wisdom. And uh, it's perhaps the most emphatic sort of multi-species coexistential ethic uh, shared in perhaps all of Tamil poetry. So uh, the organization I run is named after from that couplet. And what we do is we do advocacy, and we do a lot of nature education. So here I am in a place, I'm in a village called Pichanur. It's a very rural area, and there two kinds of children come to the workshop, which is actually about butterflies. We are spending 2 days just observing, journaling, drawing, discussing butterflies, and something very strange happens. India, if, some people might know, there's a long practice of casteism. The origin of caste is a text called the Manusmriti, where this so-called whatever prophet-like figure says that the Brahmins are at the top, and the other kinds of people are at the bottom, and they don't mix, and there's a lot of intercaste violence, and mm, there's a historian called Deepak Lal who maps the genesis of caste being people coming in and destroying forests, and the local people, the Adivasi, the tribal people, used for labor to form statehood and civilization. I mean, that's a totally different topic. But then you find caste lineations very strong. So if somebody were to drink water, a lower caste person were to drink water from an upper caste pond, they will be killed in many places in India. It's so serious. And so something magical happens while interacting with nature and taking children into nature. So I want to read that out. The fact that caste segregation ran deep in this landscape, even among children, was only slightly apparent to me, an outsider, in how they sat to eat lunch and how some children did not budge when I tried to make small groups of them. So I let their teacher do it instead. The next day, by popular request, it was half a day of butterflies. In the morning, we went on a long walk in the village outskirts, field guides and observation tables in hand, searching for butterflies. We saw common banded peacock butterflies mud puddling on a heap of wet red soil. A southern birdwing patrolled over the coconut plantations, bringing much excitement and yelling each time it passed overhead. Along the wayside, between plantations and fallow lands, four rings a kind of butterfly, were plentiful, with their slow flutter low over the verge grasses. Towards the end, we sat on the banks of the Kumitipati River to share our findings, observations, and questions, and listen to each other. Some children had spotted over 25 species. Later in the day, Sandhya, one of their teachers, shared with us rather movingly that somehow during the activity, the children had gradually started interacting, and by midway, they were freely talking to one another, helping each other find, identify, and observe species. This was something she said she struggles to bring about on a daily basis, given the socio-political setting of the place. This occurrence left me thinking for several days after we returned to Chennai. What was in the nature of watching butterflies or birds or trees that was able to erase, if only for a few hours, such deep social segregation? Was it simply that while watching a butterfly together, caste was irrelevant? Or even more significantly, in order to pay attention to wonder, to raise questions, one had to drop away social constructs, if not bring these constructs also into observation and to be on a humanly equal plane. Um, one of the learnings I constantly come upon that is that biodiversity is an extraordinary political science teacher, and that when children, especially when young, or perhaps at any time, or children, people, whoever. When we inhabit spaces of utter diversity, we are able to be tolerant to and learn from all kinds of otherness, our own, including our own social political landscape. And perhaps that sort of inclusivity, that imagination of inclusivity, only the non-human can lend us through its experiences. I'll do one last reading, and we will stop for questions. So we are close to 45-minute mark, and um, yeah. To sort of culminate the story of hydrology in Chennai, and maybe I'll stop sharing here. Do I have anything else I want to show? Um, Maybe if I'll put this into some question. The beach, the promenade on the beach is also the place where we conduct our protests, and that's one of the sites, and you'll find a lot of protest scenes evoked in the book. And with such a deep hydrological history, what happened is, as the erasure of wetlands started happening, you find that the language of people also changed, because wetlands started to be seen as wastelands and opportunities to build upon and profit. Uh, an example for that is what used to be beautiful words of evocation and invocation of uh, all kinds of wetlands, started becoming foul language. And I want to put that in a scientific sense, not to use foul language here. But for instance, in Tamil, Yeri Vaya is a very common sort of thing, bad word thrown at people. Yeri means the most common life-giving kind of wetland in Chennai and other parts of South India. Yeri Vaya means, Yeri mouthed guy, it's like swamp mouth, it's like, um, which is to say that pollution has entered a lot of these lakes, and they stink, and to call somebody foul mouth. Similarly, to call somebody an idiot or fool, words like Madayan, Muttal, Mudan is used. Now, the Madayan, Muttan, Mudal are people actually who, from lower castes, who actually care for wetlands, make sure the bunds are intact, make sure the sluice gates are working, and water is able to reach all the canals and the fields. And their work, uh, which was essential at a point, and still remains essential, um, started is now a very common bad work in 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 the city. If you cut off somebody on the road, one very common bad word which would be thrown is "purumbo." Uh, it's like, if you call that somebody on the street, they'll get into a fight with you. But then that means common land, commons, grazing land, wetland, estuarine commons, tidal flats, mud flats. These were called Porombo because everybody, it belonged to everybody. And then the British actually made it a bad word because common land could not be taxed. Uh, Land enclosed could be taxed, and this was like, what do I do with it? Okay, build on it. So the paradigm of urbanization uh, is linked with how language usage changed, which is all a big sort of introduction to say that one of the rivers in Chennai is actually a bad word. Kuvam, one of the distributaries of Kosastalayar, is so bad that pe- people call each other that. And we are actually counter mapping this river, and I'll read for about 2 minutes, and I'll stop. If there is just one piece of information I must give about Chennai and nothing else, which would let an intelligent researcher weave most of its history, ecological, socio-political, and so on, what should it be? I would tell them of the land's gradient. The land slopes here from around north and northwest to south and southeast. The invisible but powerful agency of the tectonic platform we stand on grips my imagination today as I stand at the Kesavaram Dam, tracking the Kuam River from its estuary at the end of Marina Beach over Napier Bridge, and to its very beginning as a branch of the Kosastalaya River. So I'm with a group of people going and trying to map this, and later we'll take people on this river tour and say, listen, this is our history. You know, the slope's agency keeps showing itself as we travel countercourse. Rivers naturally flow, branch, and spread over slant set by land. Surface geology is influenced by land gradient again. Most of Chennai city is river alluvium, clay, and coastal deposits. Land use occupations and vegetation follow. Land had already loaded the dice in certain directions. There have been many battles fought in this province between the British and the French, between Tipu Sultan and the British, the Pallavas and the Chalukyas, the Cholas and the Rashtrakutas, who fought their war in Takkolam. In this region, armies which attacked from the north from higher ground almost always won and took over the region. Elevation and vision were a huge advantage for Tipu Sultan, who perhaps took the most fearsome resistance to the British, inspiring struggle in many other parts of the country. My language was determined by land slope. I speak Tamil instead of Sanskrit, Prakrit, or Telugu because of it. Um, so I describe the river and just the last couple of paras here. How the river changes as you actually move upstream. Till then, Kuam is clean and thriving with bird and insect life. But past Puduchatram, we see the water guzzling bottling plants of Coca-Cola and other companies sap the river further. Then further downstream around Punamalli, universities, apartments, transmission towers, and hospitals are built right upon the river, making its width just 10 to 15 feet wide in some places. From here onwards, sewage outfalls are all along the river up to the sea. Once it enters a city, any river becomes a black, toxic, foul-smelling trickle. Cities grow along riversides, then slowly forget their ecological, hydrological genesis. Later, they slowly collapse under their own weight, unless perhaps there's a powerful reinvocation of what birthed it in the first place, a river. And I want to quickly sort of dedicate that to to Robert Macfarlane, who has been one of my greatest heroes in writing, and he has written the forward to this book. And perhaps more important than this book is his upcoming book in May, is A River Alive, which I think is going to be a sort of literary lifeboat for us, asking a very important question in a world ruled by Trump and Musk. And uh, um, please look out for that as well. Thank you. That's all I have to say.
Oh, thank you, Yuvan. That was very beautiful and quite an arch from crustaceans to language and politics and colonialization and post-industrial local knowledge. That was beautiful, and butterflies and how people can work together over watching butterflies. That was really, really inspiring. Many people in the question and answers referred to that. So again, thank you very much. I just want to say something for people because since I work in forensics, I have to deal with a lot of violence that you quickly mentioned. And it is true, and it's proven, and there are many scientific, even meta studies about the fact that nature lowers stress and enhances immune system function, lowers blood pressure, reduces anxiety, gives you better cognitive function, improves mood. So, your little remark was scientifically truthful, and people should actually also care for nature because of that, because it helps humans to just function. Since you were speaking a lot about more general topics, I don't want to go into too specialized questions right now, but one that was also on my mind was how can you personally put a little bit of environmental protection, talks or consciousness or anything like that into school programs, or so that it does not just reach people who are activists, but also, let's say, the commune population. You already mentioned something like the beach walks, but can you massage it into governmental or school programs or not?
That's a wonderful question. Thank you for asking, Mark, and I'd love to answer that. We have been thinking about this quite deeply for about a decade. and we are asking, can these programs actually affect people in such a way that people become so connected with their landscapes, their trees, their and 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 stand up for it, their rivers. And we have developed something called the action pedagogy, um, and which has three pillars. And this I sort of evolved with the help of a fantastic researcher from Boulder University called Louis Chawla, who for the past 40 years of her life looked at who becomes an environmental steward. Who perhaps all of us here in the Linnean Society is one of them, um, who actually stands up and takes action. And she finds that, uh, and she sort of compiles that into her papers and into her various theses. One very important learning from that is pure intellectual engagement does zero connection. So we can learn about all kinds of climate change and water crisis. Like intellectually, it takes it moves people, but it remains at the cognitive level. So the importance of direct experience. I have seen situations where I have taken a group of children once to a wetland, and next time it's threatened, children are taking initiative by themselves to do what it takes. One visit, one actual experience, and now that's quite challenging, to be able to offer that. So nature is sometimes such a scarce presence, but that's the challenge we are up against. Can even on our streets, can we look at the insects, the trees, and that sort of direct experience can transpose and extrapolate itself into other kinds. So we have three pillars for this action pedagogy, and we found it very strong. And we work a lot with the government schools of Tamil Nadu, and we also study what sort of impact this has on children. Which is, if people are interested, they can look at our compilations on palluirtrust.org. Three pillars are: one is all our programs learnings are direct experience, direct engagement, locally relevant, and an unsiloing of the social, political, and the ecological. We constantly mix it together. Something about siloing these three hacks action. But to see the connection and say, okay, these government plans, these pro actually have these interests, and that's how it impacts. Typically, academics doesn't work that way. We're like a little. I study this little group, this whole. So that's broadly the pedagogy we follow, and.
I see. Yeah, that's probably extremely true. It's got to have an impact for the people. So locally relevant is maybe one of the important pillars here that many people being stewards may have to rely on or to work with. Next question was a little bit more specific about microplastics and so on, but I want to extend it a little bit. Do you work with universities and with laboratories? Do you do like the actual laboratory chemical measurements, or do you keep it on the level of experience as you described it this evening?
We so in our campaign work, in our activism work, we have to work sometimes with laboratories, for instance, to do, let's say, if there are recently there was a mass death of turtles along the Chennai coast. We're finding almost 1,500 dead sea turtles, and we had to we did laboratory tests, post-mortem tests, basically, to find that all of them are dying of suffocation from mechanized fishing, and we figured out a lot of the illegalities going on mechanized. So that's the sort of, in other circumstances, we've had water tests done in around bird sanctuaries to find that there's toluene in groundwater, postmortems of birds to find that organochlorine pesticides used over 60 years ago are still in bird bodies, and we've not really cracked it. Uh, we we are finding, I mean, Rachel Carson wrote about this a long back in America, but DDT is still is used in a way where it's used for public health, but then comes into the agriculture route like that, quite illegal. So those are some of the uh, um, sort of inlets into there are multiple kinds of collaborations and intersections one needs to do. Uh, a lot of it also scientific, yes.
Yeah. What did the turtle suffocate from in your
Yeah.
particular case?
So there is something called a turtle excluder device, which trawl nets need to use. It's like a little trap door, which if a turtle gets stuck, it can open and swim out, which is enforced by law in actually all of India. Uh, and the mechanized fishers don't follow that because they lose a little bit of fish, 5-10%. Uh, they also, during turtle season, they're also not allowed to come within about 5 nautical miles. Uh, so what's happening is, and then gill nets have a certain mesh size beyond which, smaller than which they shouldn't be, and so on. There are a lot of illegality. So they're getting trapped. The turtle have to come up to breathe. So if they get trapped for 2-3 hours, they die. So we found lung lesions in the turtle lungs, uh, showing that they actually died of suffocation, and we were able to use that for that. But that's one example, really. Yeah.
No, I understand.
It was
So
covered
it's
by The Guardian, this mass turtle death, which was one of the worst in the world. It's quite recent and people can look it up.
yeah, but it's not like a sling around the neck or something like that. It's
No. It's not
really
able
that
to
the
breathe. Yeah.
lungs are obstructed. You were also talking about birds and showing a picture about concerning birds. And one question was, do shorebird species, perhaps on migration, rely on your wetlands too, like in your case? This may also be interesting for people in other countries, for example, in the United Kingdom. And do you have information on that
Yeah, of
migrating
course.
bird species?
Yeah. I was recently in Orford Ness in the UK, and the shorebirds there were fantastic, from oyster catchers to spoonbills to all kinds of species. Yeah, um, the migratory corridor, as it were, we are part of the Central Asian Flyway, which connects Russia, Central Asia, Mongolia to India, and so uh, our geography is full of stopover sites. Uh, of tens of thousands of migratory birds which follow this here, which includes ducks like northern shoveler, gargani, which includes like the big, high and long flyers like godwits and bar-headed geese. Uh, Very interestingly, we find that coastal wetlands are much more important for migratory birds in general than migratory water birds, than inland freshwater wetlands, uh, which sort of goes against the sort of policy outlook towards wetlands, because a coastal wetland is saline, and it doesn't really, humans have a niche bias. We don't treat it as important, but and we tend to protect freshwater more. But in terms of migratory birds, coastal wetlands are far more important. All our greater flamingos are by and large dependent on coastal wetlands. I hope that's what the question was asking.
Yes, I imagine. Yes, thank you very much. You were mentioning a harbor project from a huge company in India that you obviously don't like much. How did the protests go? I mean, how did all that develop and evolve? Did it have any influence, or what happened?
That's Thank you for revisiting that, Mark. So this is a port, and one of the reasons of the port is that the same company, Adani, has the largest coal mine in the world, the Carmichael coal mine in Australia, which is right now, part of screwing up the Great Barrier Reef, and the Wangan Jagalingou people there, being ousted from their songlines, trying to make a sort of quick entry into India by, uh, that's one of the reasons, not entirely, but and protests for this have been extremely successful, because you see, the Modi government India is a very intolerant space for activists, and I'm very lucky to be part of South India, where the atmosphere is far more tolerant. If I was doing, let's say, the work I'm doing little north, I would just be in a different occupation. I don't know what it would be like. I'd be behind bars. So it was easy to generate public opposition, easier to generate public opposition. And one of the important things we did was to evoke this space, connect it to South Chennai as well, because this is where the rich and fancy people live. Because by building a port on a river which drains the city, putting about 1 to 5 million people at disastrous flood risk. And if you come to Chennai and say flood, people will be like, it's because there's all kinds of flood trauma we have. So it was important for us to make those connections and say, listen, this is not just something happening in some corner of outside the city. It's something everybody needs to worry about. And there were, a good campaign is an ecology. It needs all kinds of voices, and in each campaign, we are trying to see what kind of symbiogenetic sort of different kinds of polyphonies we can create. And in this campaign, we had children participate, we had fisherfolk participate, we connected with the labor movement, which came strongly, artists. So those are some of the strong points.
And what's the state right now? How is it going to end? Do you know, or is it open?
So what happens is they have in the policy framework, if a project is coming up so big, there's something called a public hearing. It's a very important democratic process. Often it's a sham. I'm sure there are corollaries of that in other parts of the world where there's a big hall, people come and say what they feel or how they'll be impacted. Now, if that public hearing is in opposition of the project, it cannot happen. So what happens? This was proposed in 2018. Each time public hearing happened, the project proponent sense that, and the authorities sense that there's too much opposition, they'll cancel it. And then they quite slyly announced it during COVID, in the pandemic. They're like, let's have a public hearing. There was a big uproar, cancel. So we're constantly canceling the public hearing. That's the sort of, it's a kind of a victory, Like, yeah.
Wow, yeah, that's an interesting method. Okay, I think we'll stop here. I just want to mention, but we don't have to comment on that any further. I found it very interesting that most people don't know that in India you still do have a caste system. Some people think this is a thing from the past, and that your nature walks and the butterflies and talking to kids, that came over this social segregation, even if it was just for a while. That is a very beautiful thing to hear, and maybe also a lecture or something that we could learn to encourage people not to walk into nature, not only for our own health, but for everybody's well-being, including the nature's well-being, of course. So thank you very, very much. It's very nice that you gave us such an arch, like I said, of your experiences, and I hope many people are going to read your book and the books that you recommended. And I also found it nice to have some Indian wisdom saying that sharing life with everybody is the highest level of wisdom. I find that very beautiful. So thank you very much. For those of you who are wondering what the tie is, this is the Linnean Society tie. And according to Steph at Linnean Society's headquarters, I'm the only person who is still wearing it. So if you want to join Linnean Society, get a tie and be the second person to wear the tie. Yuvan, thank you very, very much for your time and for your insights. That's it. That's a wrap. And I'm giving it back to Katie right now. Thank you.
Oh, Yuvan, Mark, thank you so much. I think we can all agree that was just so powerful. And Mark, you also, I think, can we just give it up for Mark, because you did a great job chairing and being able to bring your own unique perspective in forensic biology as well. Yuvan, thank you so much again for some really powerful stories based on your own personal experiences and the way you talk about what your research is. It's so clear you've got such a passion for this. And I really want to highlight what I've just put in the chat to people about purchasing Intertidal. Please do purchase Intertidal by Yuvan. That is available to buy and have a read of. So check out the link